You are listening to Eastmans Fly Cast, an adventure fly fishing specific podcast covering travel, tactics, and next level insight. Now your host, Brian Barney.
Hey, what's happening, guys? Got a brand new Eastmans Fly Cast for you. So this week on the podcast, I have on Joe Dilschneider. So Joe is a member of the same community that I live in here in Ennis, Montana. He owns and operates Madison River Fishing Company, and he runs upwards of 40 guides out of his shop on all these local rivers around. So Joe is a guide himself, an absolute wealth of knowledge and so much experience on these rivers. He's so knowledgeable, and he schools me on a couple things on this podcast. So he schools me on Euro nymphing. I can't seem to quite get it through my head, and he explains it really well in a way that I understand it, and also in a way that I can understand its effectiveness. So I am also learning on this podcast. He also schools me on some new Madison regulations. I thought I had him pretty dialed in, but of course it's his job to know those things inside and out. So he explains to me some new regulations on the Madison, and just a great in-depth conversation. I mean, we talk about off-season fishing. We talk about, some of the rivers that his guides operate on, some of the new age stuff that's coming to fly fishing, kind of some of the new trends with flies and effectiveness and things of that nature. And then we also just talk about attitude and enjoyment, and it was just such a great conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I think you guys are going to enjoy it too. So we'll get right into it. So this podcast is Joe Dilschneider. I'm your host, Brian Barney. This is Eastmans Fly Cast. Here we go. Okay, I'm live here. I've got Joe Dilschneider. He's the owner-operator of Madison Fishing Company. So this is pretty cool. We're in the shop here, and I've been coming to this shop for the last 20 years, and I've spent many paychecks here, but it's so cool to connect with you here on the podcast. Yeah, thanks for having me over.
Nice. Right on, Brian. Well, likewise.
Yeah.
Glad you could make it.
Man, I was so happy when you were able to purchase, this store and be able to operate it. It's such a foundation to our community, and so to be able to have you as the owner-operator here has been really cool.
Thank you. That's nice of you to say. I was pretty happy about it myself. Thinking back, it really just seemed all very natural. So it's been a part of my life for a long time too. So.
Yeah, well, you've been here, I think, longer than I have. We got chatting before the podcast. So when did you show up in the Madison Valley?
I showed up here in the winter of 1995, and it was a cold, tough winter. But somehow I made it through there, and by the time June, July rolled around, I was just, smitten and never wanted to leave, and basically that's the way it's worked out. I'm still here.
Man, this valley is a great place, and it's changed over the years, but it's still a great community, isn't it? I just love being part of it.
Oh yeah.
Yep. And you've got girls in school, same age around as my girls in school. So we see each other at basketball games and volleyball games, and see each other on the river every now and again. I think the first time we met, in fact, you told me the story, and I don't, not to boast or to brag, but the first time we met was in the high country hunting elk.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I remember you told me this story, and I'll never forget. You said you ran into me, and I was up on the trail sleeping by myself somewhere off the trail, way back up in one of those canyons, and you asked where my camp was, and I told you, it's on my back. I'm just moving with my camp. But that's the first time I ever met you.
Yeah, that was the first, my first encounter with a hunter like yourself who goes so light and just bivvies on the ground. And it was like before daylight, and we'd heard a bugle, and we were moving up into that drainage, and I think I almost stepped on you. I thought you were a log or something. You were in your bivvy, and I either tripped over you or almost stepped on you. You popped up, and I remember being really startled and like, holy cow, what is this? You okay, man? Yeah, so that was cool. Yeah, I'll never forget that.
Yeah, well, we get to take advantage of all the seasons living in Montana here, and especially in this Madison Valley. And elk hunting is definitely one of them. But the other one is this great river that, and all the surrounding rivers as well. But you primarily guide on the Madison, or you guys guide on all these surrounding rivers?
We guide all over the place.
Do
The Madison is our home stream, but we guide the Big Hole, Beaverhead, Ruby, Jefferson, Gallatin, Yellowstone, Missouri, and even further afield than that throughout the state. But by far and away, the Madison is the majority of our outfitted trips, and where we fish most of the time. Personally, I mean, it's right here. It offers, as you know, so much variety from top to bottom. There's all sort of different types of water and zones, and then layer on top of that the changes through the seasons, and it's a lifetime's worth right here.
Isn't it? That's why we all ended up here, I think. It's such a great home river. And I love traveling to these different rivers and fishing them during different seasons. But it's just so easy when the Madison is in my backyard that I have a hard time leaving this place. And it's so good,
Yep, no doubt. Variety is the spice of life, but then sometimes you wonder why drive all that way. Why?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Well, and two, it's about enjoying what's right around you, and when you live here and your family's here, it's like if you get a free afternoon, you don't have to make these big plans to travel around and take your drift. But you were fishing yesterday. I was fishing the day before yesterday.
Yeah.
We've got some really good fair weather for December. I can't remember another winter quite like this.
Yeah, it's been mild. It's starting to grow slightly concerning. That it's so dry. We got a weather report recently from Tom DeMiola, who used to own the fishing company. He keeps the weather stats for Ennis, and he said November was the driest. As of the end of November, this was the driest year that he had recorded in the 20 years he's been keeping weather data.
Wow, that's spooky.
Yeah, so it starts to get a little concerning, especially we love to ski, and now that hunting season's kind of over, we're like ready for some snow in the high country. So anyway, the forecast looks like maybe this weekend it'll come.
Yeah, well, and it seems like the moisture, it seems like our winters have been coming later and later every year, at least the moisture end of it.
Yeah.
So, hopefully we've got some moisture to come so that river can continue to run down there. Yeah, that's
no
a big
doubt.
part of it.
But in the meantime, might as well dance, right? Go fishing.
Yeah, that's it. Gosh, it's been good. That off-season fishing is so good on the Madison. Like right now during the wintertime, and you were saying that you ran a guide trip yesterday, your latest guide trip ever.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. We had one on Saturday as well, which we thought might have been the latest, but I think yesterday was the latest. Usually by this time of year, it's a little rough, and we're busy, and we're thinking more about sort of the deep winter sports, more skiing than fishing, although we do fish in the winter. And then we come back to it usually, shortly after the first of the year. But yeah, this time of year is amazing. I probably fish personally a little more in the winter months, late fall through early spring, than most other times of year, and it's not always great, and it's not for the faint-hearted. You got to have the right clothing and the right attitude, and sometimes snowshoes and stuff like that. But it is fabulous, and fishing can be great. But the solitude and the beauty of winter on this river, especially in the upper reaches, is just awesome.
Well, there's nobody around. You have the river all to yourself.
Yeah.
The mountains are so beautiful because they're snow covered. We're not dealing with any of the smoke from wildfires this time of year, so the air is so crystal clean.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a great experience. And like my buddy Charlie tells me, he said you're about the only one that's willing to freeze to go chase big brown trout. But it's a good time to chase big browns on this river too.
Oh yeah.
I swung up a really good one on Sunday.
Nice.
It was a really nice fish. Yeah.
Awesome.
But that off-season fishing, taking advantage of that, I think guys, when they look towards the Madison, like there's the big hatches that I'm sure we'll talk about in the springtime. The summertime salmon flies is insane. Everybody needs to chase that once in their life. The late season hoppers, but there's something to be said for this off-season fishing, and I feel like it's almost a local season because that's when I do most of my fishing too. Is winter, and then spring I fish really hard, and I think another good off-season time of year to fish would be like that springtime before runoff. Gosh, is that good fishing?
Yeah. As soon as you see some days sort of start to tick up into the high 30s or low 40s, it's like game on. I mean, even before that, honestly, you can fish the upper Madison up there around Reynolds and $3 in in below zero weather. The river flows clear and stays open, and the fish are in there, and you can have good fishing. It's a little extreme, but when you get some days, in the mid to high 30s or low 40s, and the wind's not blowing too hard, it's super pleasant out there, and the bite can be fabulous, as you know. So, yeah, we love that time of year. I'd say, in fact, I'd even go so far as to say the spring, whenever that warm-up happens, sometimes it's mid-February, sometimes it's not till mid-March or even late March, but it's somewhere in there where you start to see the first little hints of the change of seasons. That's sometimes some of the best catching of the whole year. And it's typically the most productive tactic is indicator nymphing, so your new Western style of nymph fishing. And everyone loves to hate, the bobber and nymphing and all that. But the truth is, it's a deadly effective tactic. And if you do it well and you know this river at that time of year, that's when you can really, really wail on them and catch a lot of fish,
I've grown to love it. Like, I like all styles of fishing. I love throwing a dry fly. I love pulling a streamer. And I love to go deep down the rabbit hole of each one. But I love technical nymphing with an indicator. I can't get into the Euro nymphing. I've talked to multiple guys that are really good at doing it. And it just seems like the cast and the drift are so tight to you and so short that it works good for smaller streams, but our bigger rivers where you really need to cover water. And then also when you get really good at technical nymphing, you can run 100-foot drifts or 200-foot drifts way down below you with this extended loop drift, or just being able to set the hook and get to that indicator and to those bugs. But it's so effective and so effective for good fish. I've fallen in love with it. I like technical nymphing, and I take it over to the steelhead water. I use it a bunch over on the Olympic Peninsula over there, along with swinging bugs. But it's so highly effective for these fish that I really like nymphing, and I like nymphing with an indicator, and I'm not ashamed to say it.
I'm glad to hear you say that, man. I'm with you. I think I've long said this, that nymph fishing is like the high art of fly fishing. It is really the most in-depth and complex in understanding the depth of the water and the speed of the current and sort of the makeup of the stream bed and where the fish might be holding. There's so many different variables with it that it's more complicated than dry fly or streamer fishing, which are both fabulous. In fact, I'd put them higher on the preference scale than nymphing, but nymph fishing is wonderful, and I think it's just one break in our sport, and to be a really good, well-rounded angler, you've certainly got to know how to fish a nymph. And but I'm a little different. I've been getting into the Euro nymphing lately.
Have you?
And it's fun. It's something different. I suppose that's part of it. If you've fished your whole life, it's kind of fun to have this new little sort of nuance to it. But you're right. It is much more limiting than nymphing with an indicator. With an indicator, you can fish further, you can fish definitely longer casts, cover more water, all those things that you mentioned. But in the right situations, at the right, wind and light and stream setup, that Euro nymphing tactic is incredibly effective. There's no question in my mind that it's more effective than indicator nymphing. Just from my experience. But you've got to have the right kind of little hole or bucket at the right distance and the right angle where, like you say, you're kind of a little bit more on top of it. But it's fun, and it presents it sort of a new challenge to understanding it, to rigging it. There's the whole rabbit hole of the different flies, the different size tungsten beads and the jigs and the perdigons. So all of us here, I think, are kind of into it. Right now, and it's definitely more of a winter, early spring type tactic. Mm-hmm. I don't take my Euro nymph rod with me in the summertime because you never know, you run into a great dry fly hatch and you've got the completely wrong tool for it, right? So it's been fun.
Well, that's cool.
It.
Well, I hear it's so much more effective. Like you hear those the tournament guys or the competitive fly fishermen, they say it's not even a comparison between the two. They're so sold on that Euro nymphing, and so it's done with a lot of tight lines, right? Yeah. And so you're throwing up into a run or into a bucket, and you tight line the whole way down. Why do you think it's more effective? Do you think your bugs are on the bottom more where the fish are, or do you think you're more sensitive on the bite of those fish where you don't miss them, or what makes it more effective than nymph fishing with an indicator?
Yeah. So I think about that the entire time I'm in the water, Euro nymphing. I'm like, why is this working so well? So I think there's a few different elements, And I don't know what combination those things work together to make it more effective, but I would say number one, you're fishing it basically, you're fishing generally two flies, tungsten bead weighted flies on pretty much just leader material. Not even really fly line is in the water. So that lets those flies, when they first land, basically just depth charge straight down with no real resistance from the leader or from the fly line. So you can put the flies basically in the strike zone down deep really quickly without burning too much of your drift with the flies dropping. Number two, there's no strike indicator or big fat PVC fly line. So when you're indicator nymphing over a single hole or something and that bobber's coming over the fish or dropping on the fish and the fly line, those potentially can be distractions or can spook the fish, especially after multiple times. Number three, I think the flies themselves, which have evolved along with the tackle and the tactic. For the most part, most guys Euro nymphing now are using these tungsten bead jigs. So the hook is a jig hook, a tungsten bead, and quite often they're using Perdigon flies, which I don't know how familiar you are with those, but it's a type of tie that the body's super sparse. It's basically, it's not even dubbing. It's like using like tinsel or something and then epoxying over it. So it creates a really slick and very sparse taper from the bead down to the bend of the hook and on a tungsten jigged hook. So the fly itself has very little resistance in the water. That again helps it sink faster. And it just rides, it just stays down there. And number four, you like you mentioned, use a long rod and you're mostly very tight lines. So you're the ability to detect the strike maybe just slightly better, like as far as feeling it, a little less delay. So I think it's sort of all of those things coming together that for some reason make it super effective. But the caveat is you got to, like what my experience is on the Madison is you've got to be in the right spot. You've got to have a little hole at about 20 to 25 feet, 45 degrees upstream, right? So you're not shooting line. You're basically just throwing that 25 feet, kind of flopping it up, high sticking it through there. That's the tactic. So as soon as I've fished out this little hole in front of me, I'm on the hunt for something else that kind of sets up that way. And it's not like every 10 feet there's an exactly perfect spot for that. So that's where indicator nymphing is a little more versatile than this. But that's just my 2 cents on it. I keep thinking about it. Like I said, every time I'm out there, I'm like, why is this so different and why is it working so well? One of the in our time fly fishing, there's been a whole series of innovations that have come down the pipe, right? I can remember when the bead head first showed up. That was huge. And all of a sudden now you can't buy a fly that's not a bead head, really. It's hard to find them. Then there was closed cell foam, right? Dave's hopper was all fibers and deer hair and everything. Now most hoppers are just straight up foam rubber, the whole thing. So there's a whole bunch of them, but we could go on and on about that. But one of the more recent ones, I think, that's really, really for real and effective is the jigged hook. And when you put a bead on a jig hook, the fly rides differently. It rides point up. And those jigged hooks quite often are stronger than a lot of the straight shank hooks that we've fished and tied on for years. So they hold fish really well. The way the jig and the knot kind of work and the bend of the hook, you don't lose as many fish. They don't bend or break. The hooks don't bend open or break. And then thirdly, the way they ride, they don't actually hang up as easily on the bottom. So I actually think that tungsten jig hook, regardless of how you've dressed it or tied it, is a key part of the success. Because even as a dropper fly under a hopper or salmon fly or under a traditional Western nymph rig with a bobber, those jig hooks are really working well. And a lot of us have really gotten on board with believing they are more effective. And I think that basically arose out of the Euro nymphing style of fishing, those flies.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, that is so interesting. Yeah. With just the progression of fly fishing over the years. And just like you said, to be a complete angler, you have to be good at every facet of angling, you know? And so, that tight line nymphing is just another version of that. But yeah, that's interesting that those jig hooks are going to translate into other Western fly fishing, like you say, underneath a hopper or standard nymphing, that they just fish better. And it's wild. it's like those little things. Like you say, it doesn't hang up as much, and you wouldn't think that would be a big deal. But I know, for steelhead, we've been, we've had a bunch of revelations in fishing for these steelhead over there over the years, from, using yarn flies to beads were crazy. But then the beads, they're this hard bead that gets caught in between the rocks, so you're constantly busting off your bead.
Right.
And just changing to a soft bead where it can squeeze between the rocks and you don't break off as much. I caught more steelhead last year than I'd ever caught just using a soft bead. But it's crazy how those little revelations can come to you and you start using them, even if they came to fly fishing through tight line nymphing, and just make us more effective.
Yeah. Yeah, it's easy to sit here and think maybe, well, where else could this sport go? What other innovations haven't been thought of? Surely we've thought of everything, right? But that's surely not the case. There's technology and advances in materials and things. Our sport is still evolving, and there are still little things out there that are changing the game, and changing it for the better, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to know for sure, but it's fun that it is still evolving like that, and there are still new things to learn and experience and try.
Yeah, progression of the sport. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, that is fun. Well, and it's a little bit like when foam flies first came out. A lot of guys didn't want to fish them because they didn't feel like it was a tied fly with tied materials, but now it's just the standard because they're so effective. And a lot of it's not because they're more appealing or look better. I think it's because they fish better, because they float better. You can mend them better. You can keep them in the lines. You can skate them. So it's almost not even a look or aesthetics of the fly. It's function of that fly. And so much of fly fishing is function over aesthetics.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to use what works. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
We're all looking to, it's not all about the fish or catching fish. For me personally, I should say, it's not. But having said that, when I fish, I still try and fish as well as I can,
mm-hmm.
and as effectively as I can. It's not that I'm so caught up on how many I catch or catching the fish, but I'm going to try my hardest and do my best and use the best materials or flies or the things that I feel are the most effective. So
that's the fun of it.
Yeah.
It's being immersed in it, thinking about it, and thinking how you can be better, where those things are laying. And you're right. It's not about counting numbers or catching all these fish or anything like that. But I love to be immersed in the challenge, thinking about it. And I'm having the most fun when I'm trying to catch the most for some reason, or when I'm really immersed in it. And you do have to, these rivers are so beautiful around here. A lot of times you can go down the river and you get done with your day and you're like, I didn't even pick my head up from the side of the stream. So you do have to pick your head up and look at the mountain range and stop and have lunch now and again and take a break and laugh with your buddies in the boat. That's a big part of fly fishing as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's I'm still in awe every day here, not just on the water, but just in our everyday lives. It's Montana, and this part of Montana is absolutely beautiful.
Oh, it's so fun.
The sunset 2 nights ago was absolutely insane. And yesterday I looked on Facebook, and there was like 25 different people from Ennis that had posted pictures of the sunset because it was everywhere. And, just things like that happen. I think most of us that live around here all, are really, love the outdoors and love nature and really love living in such a beautiful place. So yeah, that's a big part of it.
Absolutely. Well, you definitely employ one of the most knowledgeable staffs around, and I always think it's good, and such great guys too. Every guy that I see on the river or whether it's in the shop, everybody's real nice, like willing to give information, share information in the shop. It's like it's almost the guys in the shop are willing to share what's working for them, because it's not about keeping secrets or the secret of fly fishing. Really, I think it comes down a lot to skill and reading water and fishing this river. So they're always willing to help me out and help me figure things out. And even if they don't know, if I'm headed to the coast or headed to the salt, they're great guys. But I always think it's good when you're going to a new spot, and I do this as well, is to hire a guide for a day and just try to learn from those guys. Like your staff, they know the timing of things. They know the flies that work. They know the tactics. And so really, if you're planning this week-long adventure out west to go fly fishing, it's so beneficial to book a day or two with these guides. And then, they're just guys like the rest of us. So if you're just up front and say, hey, I got you for a couple days, I'm trying to get a feel for this river, and then I'm by myself for the rest of the week, those guys are going to bend over backwards to help show you the tactics and help you with the flies and help you get a good understanding. I think it's so beneficial for guys to do that, and I don't think they could get them from a better place. How many guides do you have that run out of your shop?
Oh man, it's close to 40.
Wow.
Yeah, and the way the guide scene works around here, a lot of those guys are independent contractors.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, all of them work for me as guides as independent contractors.
Okay.
I make that distinction because most of the guys that work here in the shops also guide.
Mm-hmm.
So they are both employees of the business as well as IC guides. But yeah, a lot of guides. It's just there's a big demand for our guide services, and my business has sort of evolved to meet that demand, and so that's what we do. But we try to help perpetuate a really positive and friendly culture
Mm-hmm.
among the guides, and on the water and off the water and in the shops, and and try and hold each other to a very high level of professional standards. I really believe that the guides around here, not just on the Madison, but in this region, really are the best fishing guides in the world, and really, in many ways, sort of set the bar for what it means to be a professional fishing guide in the world today. I think we have a responsibility not only to ourselves and to our clients, but also just to the greater good, to kind of do it right and be friendly. And yeah, I love that about Ennis. Basically, a lot of us we're competitors, but we're also friends. We're what I call frenemies, So there's real good camaraderie, pretty much among everyone, even guys who are kind of on different teams, so to speak. Yeah, and as far as in the store with the guys, I mean, I'm super proud of all these guys that work for me. They're extremely knowledgeable, which is really important. I think that's one of the real edges that we can bring in a very competitive business world, is our knowledge, not only of this fishery but other fisheries, and tackle and gear and tactics. So that's the proposition we bring for our customers, is that you can call us, you can talk to us personally, and we can share whatever knowledge or experience we have with you. But especially, of course, about the Madison. I mean, that's really the number one thing that people come to a fly shop for, is information. Whether they book us for a day or two, or whether they just walk in and want some info, that's the business we're in, and we're, of course, more than willing to share and help people and try and help people enjoy their time here. And what happens is, the beauty of our sport is it's just more than business, or it's way more than that. It's you develop relationships. There's a camaraderie around our shared pursuit, our love of the game, that exists among all anglers. And then you make some connection, and you try and help someone and give them some info on where they ought to try, or what they ought to use, or whatever, and it works out, and it creates a little bit of a starting point of a friendship there, and then it can just evolve from there. So what we've got over the years of being here is this awesome sort of community that stretches like basically all over the world, with people that know this place and come here, and we get to know them personally, and then we keep in touch with them, or they come back year after year. And it's just, that's really one of the most enjoyable things about it, is that, that kind of connection that you can make with people, and sharing the love of the game with them.
Yeah, well, and the hiring process has to be a lot different than other places or other businesses, as you hire the fishiest dudes. Like, it seems like everybody I meet is a bro in here, and it's their passion is fly fishing.
Yeah.
They spend every waking moment thinking about it, and every day off or free afternoon they spend fishing. The guys live on the river, and if I'm not seeing them here in the shop stopping to grab something, I'm seeing them at the takeouts or the launches on all their free days. So I think the hiring process is a bit different, as you get the fishiest dudes to work in here.
It's what I call the defective gene club, sort of tongue in cheek, kind of joking, but there's a lot of truth in it. The defective gene club are made up of those of us who basically couldn't really have any other job, because we're so obsessed with fishing that we have to be involved with it, around it all the time. And so, yeah, that's one of the commonalities that you'll find here. Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of passion, and that's awesome. Really fun. And it extends way beyond the guys in the fly shop. We know plenty of Defective Gene Club members that are out in the real world amongst amongst other people, lawyers, bankers, doctors. Yeah, but they're thinking about fishing all the time, right?
They've got the sickness, the same as all of us, right?
They got the sickness, yes.
Yeah, well, yeah, you definitely hire really good guys or have a great staff. But yeah, and just friendly on the river as well, and real helpful, and it's got to help out in your business having such a knowledgeable staff that can answer those type of questions to anybody that picks up the phone around here.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's great. People do call us all the time. And, the age of Amazon, that's like I said, that's one of our edges. You can buy fly tackle a lot of different places, and a lot of what we sell is sort of commodity-like, I guess you could say, meaning that you could buy it any number of places, even on Amazon. However, you cannot call Amazon and ask them whether or not you should use an intermediate sinking line or a floating line for tarpon fishing in the Keys in May, But you can call us and ask us, and we'll give you some straight info on that question. So we try to, encourage people to reach out with their questions, and that's the business we're trying to build online and in the stores, one where we're here to help and we're here to provide guidance on, tackling gear and tactics and whatever else.
Yeah, it's such a difference maker. Well, so we're into our off-season fishing now, and I think guys should take advantage, especially of the springtime before the runoff. What are some of your favorite hatches to fish in the springtime on these surrounding rivers?
The woolly bugger hatch, of course, starts early.
That's the best out of all of them, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I mean, what starts out. So now we're pretty much done with the betas. So for the next 2 months, 2.5 months at least, 3 months, let's say, it's going to be mostly midges, right?
And the midge hatch can be insane too. In some of these flats, when you catch it just right and these midge are hatching, there's some big fish that are sitting in those slicks looking for those things, and they're just piled in there, So yeah, midge the next couple 2-3 months.
Yeah, and that's you got to get into it. It is what it is. If you want to fish this time of year, that's where you want to focus. So that's tiny flies, long leaders, fine tippets, really delicate presentations. You can have some great dry fly fishing on the upper Madison up above the West Fork on midge hatches for the next few months. But it's very demanding, technical, finesse angling. So that's super fun. I get way into that. You can always nymph during those times too, with a variety of patterns and do well. But when you see a pot of fish rise into midges, you got to kind of try and try it, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, next thing that comes after that is spring betas. Basically, is really the first good hatch that starts in March. So you scale it up in size a little bit, and then the streamer bite starts to work also. So there's the streamer junkies basically fish that all year round. So on this river, you basically can streamer fish all year round. Probably not that effective in deep winter, but it can be.
If the right fish are looking for it, even in deep winter, it seems like I've been bringing some of my wintertime steelhead tactics of swinging flies into wintertime runs down there, and it's amazing I can get them to eat most of the wintertime on that swung fly.
Yeah.
When you get it by the right fish, he seems to eat it. Now, they're not going to chase it out of the boat, and, I went down the other day and threw streamers all day and didn't touch one fish all day long, until I pulled out a nymph rig here or there. But, man, they will eat it in the wintertime, but you're right. When they come on it in the spring, that is so fun.
Yeah, so that's always a caveat. That's always fun. But for the real geeky hatch guys, the hatches here are great too. So that betas thing, that can be great dry fly fishing too. It's a little more intermittent, kind of weather dependent, and it tends to be the dry fly action tends to be mostly in the upper reaches of the upper Madison.
Okay.
And then you come into April, and we start to get some spring caddis and the March browns. That's actually not until towards the end of April.
That's right.
And right around May 1st. And you'll have those caddis and March browns going at the same time. that's when the dry fly fishing can really turn on down here closer to Ennis, where the river's quite a bit different in structure than it is in the upper river, and definitely very spotty. It's not a guarantee to hit good dry fly action at that time of year. In fact, the hatches can just get going and you can get hit with a big blast of runoff and it basically kills any chance. So things have to line up right. But in my time here, I've seen enough days in late April through the first week or two of May that were just lights out dry fly fishing, that we're out there hunting for that to happen every year. It doesn't always happen.
Opportunistic, right? You have to just go out fishing and put your time on the river, but then you run into those magical days, right? When the overcast days and even like those March browns, it's not even a guarantee we'll see a March brown every year on this river.
Exactly.
You know, or it comes during the runoff or something, but every once in a while you see that magic of those March browns, those great big mayflies when they start coming down, and then those big fish are keyed in on them. But you're right, is that it's you almost can't count on it. You almost just got to spend your time on the water, and it's not like you luck into it, but eventually you do run into a good hatch.
Yeah. The cool thing about that time too, and those hatches, if you catch some dry fly action, is the fish tend to be, steady risers. Once they sort of get on the dry fly, they start to rise to them, and so you can head hunt a little bit, which is, everybody loves to do that, and that's just, it's not something that you can bank on all the time on the Upper Madison. So when you hit it, it's really fun.
That head hunting is a fun way to go about it, right?
Yeah.
So going down the river, looking for rising trout, stopping in runs and looking for a rising trout.
Yeah.
And then, like you're stating, once you see him in that line, he's in that line feeding, and then you got to try to just feed him a bug. But it's kind of high pressure too, as you can't make a bunch of casts and blow that fish out of there. You want to make one good cast to where he's at and run it down and hook him would be the goal.
Yeah, exactly. So that's super cool. And another thing that's worth mentioning, Brian, is that the Squalos, which, Squalo hatch has been a significant, big deal on the Bitterroot and some other
Western
Montana rivers for a long time. When I came up here and started fishing here and living here in 95, in those early years, I heard of the Squalo over there, but I never heard of them on the Madison or never really saw any. Over the last 25 years, though, we started seeing them on the lower Madison occasionally in April, and we're like, wow, that's crazy. That's a Squalo. You see one or two. Well, over the last 10 or so years, the number of Squalos that we're seeing on not only the lower but now in the upper Madison in the springtime has just increased year over year. And I'd actually love to hear some other guys' opinions on this, but that's my experience, is that we're seeing them more and more and more every year. And the fishing, we're actually catching fish on squalo patterns and chubbies and things in the springtime as well now. That didn't seem like that used to really be a thing around here. So it's an interesting question, because it's like, is it possible that those bugs, that it was like this long-term cyclical thing where they were in decline for a long time and now they're coming back? Or maybe they were never really in this river drainage for as long as time, and maybe somehow they were transplanted here 50 years ago and it's just taken time. Why is it that we're seeing more and more every year now? Why now in time, and what is that about? I don't know, and I don't know if anyone could answer that question, but I do think it's become more of a thing here. You can fish a squala on the Upper Madison in April, and you got a good chance of hanging some good fish on it. But fishing salmon flies, stone flies, squalas, whichever, is different than, like we were talking about, head hunting with Baetis or March browns or caddis. It's a little more, you fish it from the boat. You can run and gun, and you're just casting to likely water, and those fish just come up out of those sort of good seams. It's not quite as head hunting oriented, but that's part of what makes the Upper Madison such a wonderful place, is, floating in a drift boat and throwing a big bushy dry fly from the boat and having fish like actually eat it is about as much fun as I think you can have.
I think you're right. Yeah. Well, that makes my ego feel a lot better as I have just started fishing squalos on this river in the last 2 years. And I think last year was the first year that I really got it good and then started noticing them on the willows. And they're a big stonefly, and they're a big black stonefly that's a couple inches long, almost comparable to the size of a golden stone.
Yep.
And I just wasn't keyed into them on this river, or like you say, I had never ran into them or seen them. But the last couple years, fishing that as a lead fly and then maybe fishing a nymph down below it has just been deadly. And you can have some good days on a dry fly in that springtime, but it feels like wintertime almost. There's snow around, and they're eating this giant dry fly. Yeah. That is so fun. I got a good last year down towards the lake down in there in that section. Yeah. A couple good days where I caught some nice fish, and they're that bigger next level size fish that are looking for those bugs too, which make it really fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, April is still real brown. Around here the foliage hasn't really started to sprout. The grass is still brown. There's tons of snow on the banks and in the high country. So it often is winter, and it feels like winter. And then you get a 45, 50 degree day and you feel like, it's spring. But yeah, it really doesn't start to truly feel like spring until about May 1st when you start to see things green up a little bit. But yeah, fishing April is really one of my favorite months. And then about mid-May, the runoff usually hits here. Traditionally, if you looked back at time, it's like May 15th to about June 15th, and then it starts to decline. The peak of runoff, the absolute peak of the stream flow is usually historically on June 1st on the Madison. Okay. So by about the 15th, you're back into sort of better water conditions. So that time frame is awesome too. Most people don't like to fish then, or I shouldn't say most people, but a lot of people think you can't fish or don't prefer to fish when it's high and off color, but I'm here to tell you it can be quite good. We tend to go as high upstream as we can to find the clearest water we can, but that color in the water should not be a deterrent because those fish are in there getting fat. And if you can find the right weight combinations, usually that bob or nymphing is what works best, and you can just have some gangbuster days during the actual runoff.
What kind of viz do you like in the water? Will you fish it with a foot, 2 foot, or go up higher where it's cloudy, or what are you looking for as far as runoff conditions?
I think of it more is in the color of the water. Okay. If you look at the river and you can in any way say that water looks to me more green than brown, it's green. Okay.
Yep. I know
if
what you're talking about.
If it's any shade of green.
Yep.
It's on.
I like
it. If you can just say there's no way you could ever call that green, that is absolutely brown.
Chocolate.
Then you keep going upriver.
Oh,
okay?
What a good test. So, I'm going to steal that from you. I like that.
So I hear people mention that 6 inches, 12 inches. I'm like, I don't really know how to gauge that very well myself, but I know that that color scale is what it's about for me.
Okay.
But usually by the time you get up to like the east side of the river at McAtee up through Palisades, that's marginal. Above Palisades up, you can usually find that east bank is going to be a little clearer than the west bank and some good water conditions. So we're not scared of the runoff. We fish it right through, but we always look forward to when you come out of runoff because, of course, that is the greatest, biggest event in the natural world around here, which is the salmon fly, which happens. It's not just the salmon fly. The truth is, it's salmon flies, it's PMDs, it's caddis, it's golden stones. It's like every bug under the sun is hatching all at once. But the Sammy is the big bug and the big show. And fishing the dry fly on the Madison is my absolute favorite time of year.
Mine too.
I'm there every single day, no matter what. I've done it every year, and it's hard. Some people, it's hard to plan a trip out here and hit it. I say that because I've seen so many people do it. Try to, we want to come out and fish the salmon fly hatch, and it's just not that easy to predict when it's going to happen and when you can be there in the right spot and have it all happen. But when you live here and you're out there every single day, so the hatch will go from, let's say, 20 to 30 days typically as it moves from Ennis all the way up river. In my experience, and going after it every day, that's my job, is to put my clients on the dry fly in that hatch. I'll look back most years and they'll be 4 to 8 days where a period during the day it was on fire, right? Or all day sometimes, but not that often. Usually it's like 3 or 4 hours. So even one who's done it for 25 years, every single day that it's happened, that's pretty good batting average, right? If you can get 5 or 6 really gangbuster days out of 30.
You're spot on. Like, I chase that hatch down on the Henry's Fork, the Madison, the Big Hole. I take off time every year, the Yellowstone, and try to travel these rivers and hit it. And it's the same. It's like with anything. You have to put in your time to be able to see those good epic days. You have to put in 3, 4, 5 mediocre days to see that one that just goes off. But once you have one of those good days that goes off, you're hooked. You know the payoff.
Yeah.
And then you're willing to put in as many days as it takes, throwing that dry fly to catch it. I got, couple good days on the Madison last year, one really good day on the Big Hole, good day down in Idaho. But like you say, that's out of 20 or 25 days of chasing that hatch. And some of those days, I can't put a rhyme or a reason to why I'm not catching them. Some days I put myself right in the middle of the hatch and the bugs are flying around and who knows what goes on. If the fish are gorged or if they, there's so many different variables that come into play during that hatch. But you're right, that is such a special time of year to see this river. It's a 3-inch dry fly. The biggest fish in the river are looking for them. And then it's got this high water element to it, where the high water pushes a lot of these fish to these bank lines, and the bank lines are covered up with willows and grass and trees and roots and sticks, and it's really technical. You got to get that dry fly in there and get your mends, but you got one chance to throw it on that bank line and to get to run that seam all the way down there. And then there's a lot of good fishermen that are also looking to catch these fish on a dry fly. And once you get into a good part of the hatch, it doesn't matter how many guys are fishing it, but it's a real technical dry fly fishing. And it's just it's as much fun as you can have with a fly rod in your hand. Watching those things take that 3-inch dry fly, it's like a shark taking a seal, gosh. And that's the time where you can see those 22, 24, and bigger inch fish that are looking to eat a dry fly, which is amazing. And it's that's the time of year where you see those great big browns and great big rainbows. I love that time of year as well.
I think that is, in my opinion, if you want to catch a really huge fish on the Madison, that's the best time to do it. More than likely with a dry fly, but you can fish other things through the hatch. But yeah, for some reason, at that time of year, those giant fish are just, they're gullible. And during the salmon fly hatch, every trout in the river, no matter how big it is going to come up to a dry fly at least once, and they may only get stung, or they might not even get stung. They might get fooled, and that might be it, or they might actually get hooked a couple times. It's hard to know. I think the rainbows are a little more gullible. The rainbows probably get caught more than once, but those big browns, I think they get caught one time, and that's it, if that, during the hatch.
Well, they're real selective in how they feed, too. Yeah. They only feed when the hatch is going off, or they only feed in the evening. They slide into those spots, into those feeding lanes, more so than the holding lanes in the deep water. And they only do it when the hatch is absolutely on, or they'll do it in the evening, or sometimes you'll catch them even in the morning, kind of getting those first bugs. But mostly it's the evening when they slide over those lanes and get them. But you're right, they build good instincts around you. There's some big fish in this river that you hardly ever see on a fly rod, but every once in a while you see. And when those days go off, when you do have one of those epic salmon fly days, you see a lot of those big next level fish that make that mistake.
Yeah, no doubt. You got to believe, though, it's hard. It's hard to commit, and it's easy to get discouraged, I think, if the bite's not happening, and to look for other ways to fish or other things to do. But the guys, I'm lucky at this point. Most of the people I go fishing with during the salmon fly hatch, we kind of have a standing date every year, and a lot of local guys, and they have fished it long enough and seen it good enough times that they don't waver in their commitment to it. They are 100% committed.
That's the way you gotta be.
Like, this is the salmon fly hatch. We're not fishing a dropper. We're not throwing anything else. This is what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
This is for the next 2 weeks. That's all we're doing.
Yes.
And we're gonna have our times when we're whining and crying. We're not seeing anything for hours and days at a time, maybe. But this is what we're doing, and that's, I think, important. And I think a lot of people, like, maybe lack the patience for that, or the the hard-headedness. But that's really what it takes if you want to hit it, if you want to see it, and really its full glory. You got to be out there and you got to stick with it.
You're spot on. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's so many nuances to the hatch and where you're going to fish it, in front of the hatch, in the hatch, behind it, and then trying to guess how far the hatch has moved, and then also playing other boats and fishing pressure as well. There's so many nuances to the hatch, but it is the most fun you can have with a drift boat and a fly rod that time of year. And this year we're going to get a unique opportunity. So we actually, and we didn't talk about how you feel about the new regulations, but there's some new regulations on the Madison that's going to allow us to fish that topwater from a boat now.
2022.
2022. Is that?
We gotta wait one more year.
Is that what it is? December 2 years from now?
Well, it will go into effect in 2022. That particular portion of the regulation I think allows fishing from Reynolds Pass Bridge to Lyons Bridge between June 15th and September 30th. So actually, we got to wait a year and a half. But on June 15th, 2022, I'll see you at the Reynolds Pass boat ramp because that is going to be the first day, or whatever the first day is. It's all Saturday and Sunday. Saturdays, non-commercial guys can do it, but no guides. On Sundays, guides and non-commercial floaters can do it. So the first Sunday after June 15th, I'll be there.
It's going to be an awesome opportunity, isn't it? Well, and I read through the regulation. I didn't catch that it didn't come into effect till then, but I have fished that stretch wade fishing for 20 years. I have always wanted to fish that thing out of a boat.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. It is a pretty technical stretch to row.
It is,
especially right out of the chutes there. So I anticipate there might be some calls to the Madison River Rescue Team, a few calls. But I think it's also worth noting that it's super controversial.
It is.
That decision really upset a lot of people.
You're right.
The walkway stretch of the Madison is, if it's the high church of fly fishing, $3 bridge basically, and a lot of people just believe in their hearts that it should always be that way, wade only, and are really upset by the decision. So I want to be sensitive to that. Although I'm a little bit agnostic. I thought the status quo was working well. It was fine. But I also think if crowding is an issue, which clearly it is here, it's growth of the sport in the region. There's more people wanting to do it all the time for good reason. But we need to address it. Then one of the logical solutions to dealing with the crowded situation is to create more opportunity in space and time for people to disperse and spread out. So opening that stretch to fishing from boats, I think, is going to help spread people out more a couple days a week. So I think just in principle, it was a good decision. But I'm also aware that a lot of people think that it was a travesty to open that to fishing from boats. So I think there will also be quite a bit of pushback with the new incoming administration in the next 2 years and beyond to try and roll it backwards. But I bet we'll get at least 1 year before it gets rolled backwards. And it might be one of those things where it's, there have been regulations like that on the Upper Madison over the years where there was something that went into effect for a very short period of time and then was kind of ditched. So it may be one of those things where we get 1 year and we can all look back someday when we're old and gray and be like, oh, remember that 1 year when they let us float from
yeah. Well, and it has been controversial. Not only that, but all the regulations. And there's been there's definitely smart opinions from both sides of the fence, and they've tried to voice that. But yeah, they passed the rules, and I'm just playing by the rules now and trying to make the best of it. And it is a tough situation to be in, to know what side of the fence to be on, because eventually there has to be some regulations passed, like there has on the Beaverhead and like there has on the Big Hole and different places. Eventually they have to deal with the pressure. And like you, I didn't really have a problem. Like there's pressure on the Madison, and yeah, it can be tough during the summer, but I didn't think it was anything where they need to pass special rules to make the fishing better. But eventually they have to start regulating it or keeping tabs on it. So yeah, hopefully everybody's okay with the decision, or live by the decision. We're not putting guys out of business and things of that nature, So
I don't think anything's set in stone forever, but they needed to take some steps and kind of do something. I think they were feeling a lot of pressure to do something because this has been a long process without anything happening. And the truth is, unlimited growth is not good. It's unsustainable. It's the motto of the cancer cell, unlimited growth. And the growth around here, in population growth, I mean, and the popularity of the sport is significant. Mm-hmm. And so that's for real, and that needs to be addressed because we don't want to, as much as we love it, we don't want to love it to death.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So.
Yep.
So it's some hard decisions, and I think they've really only taken one little baby step forward with this most recent set. There's a whole set of challenges that are still out there. They've got to figure out how to address the non-commercial use side, which is the largest and the fastest growing piece of the puzzle. The commercial side is only one part, but every new house that's sold over in Bozeman comes with a drift boat and a Labrador named Madison. So
it sure does. But even saying that, it seems like you can still just go find your own experience on the river.
Yeah.
A lot of this is mindset, and some guys spend all their time being frustrated or blaming other people or blaming the fishing to something that it's not, when there's still opportunity out there, not only on this river but all western rivers, lakes. There's still really good fishing to be had, and it can kind of seem like there's no more secrets left, or that it's all been explored and charted, but it hasn't. It's timing, and every year is different, conditions are different, and I just still feel like there's such great opportunity out here out west on all these rivers to still find great big trout, to still find epic fishing days, to still find it. And if there's one river that can sustain pressure, it's the Madison. We have more fish per mile than any other river out there, and a lot of really good guides have made their living on this river, and they're also, it seemed to be really good stewards of the land as well, and stewards of the river, trying to look out for the better, of the area and the ecosystem, and so I think that's good as well. And yeah, I know not everybody's happy with the decision, but hopefully it can work right, and we can continue to evolve it on the Madison, through input and through all these meetings we've had and things of that nature. But I will be taking advantage of that new stretch that's open to a boat. That'll be fun to throw a dry fly out of a boat.
Oh man, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, you hit it right. There's still great fishing here and everywhere, and it is timing and attitude and mindset is all important. Mm-hmm. But it's still great. Mm-hmm. As our buddy Eric Shores would say, these are the good old days. I don't care what anyone says. To look at it any differently than that is just giving up. It's just defeatist in a way. But it is still truly awesome. I think we here in our shops and with the guide crew that I have and the staff that I have, I would argue that we survey more anglers on the Madison than anybody, mm-hmm. right? We hear more opinions about what's going on, how the day was, how the fishing is, all that. And it is overwhelmingly positive still. I mean, this summer was just another great year, and with great fishing. And I don't mean that the river could take unlimited pressure. There is a point at which certainly somewhere on the curve where the fishery would suffer, but I don't think we're there. It's still a remarkable, resilient fishery, incredibly resilient fishery, considering how much pressure goes on out there. So it's still great. And I often think of it like this a little bit, Brian, when it's crowded. It's like, you remember when you're a little kid and you go to an Easter egg hunt, and on Easter Sunday, and all the other little kids there, it's like kind of a community thing or a group thing. Maybe it was your family or your church or whatever. And it's a little intimidating. There's like 20 other kids with their Easter baskets, and then they go, okay, go. And, and you could psych yourself out and think that you might not find any Easter eggs because there's so much competition. But you've just got to put your head down and go hunting around, and you'll probably find a few. And when you do, you feel satisfied. And I think the salmon fly hatch and just fishing in general is a little bit like that. You can psych yourself out with the competition around you, and it's actually not a productive way to think at all. And you should probably just try to block that out and avoid that, and just do what you know how to do. Go out there, enjoy yourself, be friendly, and fish well. Keep your head down, pay attention to your drift, mend your line, and fish well. And if you do that, you're going to find a few Easter eggs, some golden eggs probably still. So
and have fun doing it. You're not going to be aggro the whole time thinking about how many eggs everybody else is finding.
Yeah.
No, it's so much of it comes down to attitude and mindset. And you just mentioned that in your previous statement. How much do you see that in your boat, that attitude, a good attitude just catches fish? Like just to have a good mindset and to be an optimist and to always be looking at things and enjoying your day, you just seem to find more fish that way than when you get discouraged or upset or beat yourself up over a hook set or whatever the case is. Do you see that in your own boat?
Absolutely. No question. And it's again, it's not something you can manufacture, but or steer too much. Although as a guide, I try to be the guide, the leader of the expedition, and sort of share my way of going about it. And I try to be easygoing and not have high expectations. But I can't make somebody kind of come at it with the right attitude. But yes, we see it all the time where the more sort of angst or anxiousness and amped upness there is about catching fish and catching all the fish and counting and all that tends to be a little bit of an undermining sort of energy, right, to the success of the day. Not always, but often. And then you get people who are just happy to be there and often have no attachment to the outcome, and it just seems like they can do no wrong, right? They're catching fish under the oar blade and stuff, and you're just like, I don't know how you're doing it, but keep going. It is remarkable. So yes, there are times I think when you get out there, fly fishing can be, it's not always the same, right? It doesn't always feel the same. Every day is a little different, just like in life. And some days things go smoother and better than others. And some days are just flat out, just everywhere you turn, it's a problem or a disaster. So I think it's important to sort of recognize that sometimes if you go out and you're having a tough time, you're just tangling a lot or just hanging up and breaking off your flies like 3 times in a row, or things just aren't going really well. Recognize that and maybe stop for a little bit, maybe take a walk, take your mind off the game, like basically stop trying to force the square peg through the round hole and just kind of enjoy being in nature and reset the whole attitude. So I think that's really productive, and once in a while I'll try to help one of my anglers as a guide. I'll try to help them do that if that's the way things feel like they're going. But yeah, attitude's super important in everything.
Yep. I read a quote the other day that it's not an adventure until something goes wrong. There's always going to be things that are standing in your way or challenges or things that go wrong. And it's how you pick yourself up from those that determine how your day comes out. And you shouldn't ever walk away from, this great river with this great view and walk away frustrated or upset or mad at the day. It should always be walk away fulfilled and happy you got to spend the day. And heck, like the saying says, a bad day of fishing is always better than a good day at work.
Yeah, no doubt. It gets a little more complicated, I think, the dynamic when you're as a guide, for guides as well as for clients who are paying us a lot of money to take them fishing.
Yep.
I mean, it's
the pressure's on.
It's not lost on us that this is expensive and it's not cheap to hire a guide and go spend the day out there. And so we owe our clients our best effort, 110% every day. But 110% doesn't guarantee fishing the net. So what does 110% really look like? It's like you can only do so much towards the end of having success in catching fish, but there's a lot of other things you can do. But it's aligning sort of the client's expectations with what the guide's expectations are and what's realistic, and getting on the same page and working together is really what makes it work. But sometimes those things don't always line up, and that's just the nature of the game. I mean, there's people that do hire a guide and expect that because they're throwing down hundreds of dollars for it, that they're going to catch more fish. So there is a level of, I guess, pressure or expectation that's sometimes inherent in it, and that it can be one of the obstacles, right, to success.
I bet some of that pressure you put on yourself, it doesn't even come from the clients. Like you say, you just know that they have money invested and you want to show them a good day. And not every day lines up. But the deal is it's such a takeaway to fish with you guys that spend so many days on the river. There's so much knowledge to be gained. So, I know every day I get to get out with somebody that's super fishy, may it be a guide or a good buddy that spends a lot of time on the river. There's always a takeaway there.
Yeah.
And it's always a good time. It's that camaraderie too. It's, not that I can compare it to military, but they go through things together and build this stronger bond or stronger relationship. Sure. And the same thing with fly fishing, spending the day with buddies and trials and tribulations and weather and maybe not catching them. You build this camaraderie, but I've had some of the best laughs on the river, and then just the takeaways alone. It comes down to attitude and mindset. But to be able to fish a day with one of your guides that fishes this Madison all the time, I'm going to learn even if I don't catch a fish all day long, even if I'm on the sticks all day, I'm going to pick up so much knowledge, that he's going to share with me, about the river, the fish, or why they're doing, or just the way he looks at things. And fly fishing is such a creative process. It seems like you're always continuing to learn, and I think that's what I really enjoy about it, is this ever-evolving learning circle where you continue to gain information and gain knowledge. And we talked about some of the new crazes coming out in fly fishing, but a lot of times too, you'll see somebody bring out an old fly or an old tactic that just still works. It's just still sound. But I know I learn something every day I'm out there, and that's the gift of fly fishing to me.
Yeah, we cannot, as guides, we can't guarantee the fishing or the outcome in terms of fishing, but for the most part, we try to guarantee that we can help you expand your knowledge or skill a little bit. Teach you something, hopefully. And yes, I think all of us as guides, we all want to catch fish. We all want to catch a lot of fish. We want our clients, that's part of what we do. It's not everything, but it's certainly one of our objectives. So yeah, we just try to make it fun and enjoyable, try to make it educational, and of course, try to put a few in the net as best we can. But all you can really do is fish well, Sims has their new little slogan, "Fish it well." It's actually it's brilliant, because that's life. All you can do is try and play the game well. You can't just swing for the fences all the time or think about winning. You just can think about playing well, fishing well, and if you do that, if you fish well, you pay attention to all the little things that go into it, and try and improve upon your skills and your knowledge, then it's a numbers game at that point, and you will catch fish. You will have success, which then brings you to the question, ultimately, as an angler, is it really about catching the fish? It's, in a way, it's not. It is, but it isn't. It's
the whole process.
It's the whole journey, the process. It's the hunt. It's the and the camaraderie and all the other things that go with it. And yes, of course, the fish will be a part of that, but it's not everything.
Well, this conversation has really helped my ego. It's good to know that you good fishermen have bad days too, or have tough days as well. That Madison can kick your butt on any given day, even being one of the best rivers around.
Oh, yeah.
It's just a technical river, and then the conditions play part into it. It's tough to catch fish when you get a 50-mile-an-hour wind.
Yeah.
But I think the key is having that good attitude, taking good takeaways, and then also having the days to fish this river, because I know, one day, to pick one day on a date on a calendar is really tough to hit that epic good day of fishing.
Yeah.
But if you can line up a few days that you're fishing this river, odds are that one of those days you're going to see that epic good fishing, and the other days, you may have to work for them, be tough and see some fish or whatever, but there's always a good takeaway. And I just never regret getting out on this river. It's just always a good time out there. And there's always information to be gained. And it's probably part of the reason why we all stick around this place, is because it's a challenge. It's not a given every day, and it's different every day. And so it's, again, solving that puzzle or that riddle every single day to try to hook into a good fish.
It's a wild, wild river. And I think for me, it's easy to forget that sometimes, because it's like my backyard and I have such familiarity with it. But it is a beautiful wild trout fishery, and you just never know what's going to happen or what you're going to catch. I mean, there's an incredible variety of size of fish out there, including some real giants. So, it's a wild beast, and that's what makes it beautiful. It's unpredictable. Layer on top of that Montana weather and this valley and the potential for wind and all the sort of other factors, and it's even wilder, and challenging.
Yep.
But that's the lure of this sport, is the challenge.
Well, man, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, and I appreciate you also in our community and things. What's the best way for guys to get a hold of you?
Oh, thanks, Brian. Well, I don't know. Come on in.
Come on in.
Come on in the front door. We're right on Main Street in downtown Ennis, and
That's right.
It's a one-horse town, so it's real hard to miss us. But we of course have the social media presence on Insta and Facebook. And
you do a good job on that as well.
Websites. Thank you. Well, we just try and share our passion, really. That's all social media has really mostly been for me, is just a community thing and a way to share our passion. Now with the fishing company, we do use it a little bit more now to market some products that we sell, but we try and not overdo that, and over commercialize it. So
it seems real authentic and organic. All your
just showing the stuff that we're using, because that's really what we're just.
And you guys have a great internet presence too for all fly fishing, right?
Yeah. E-com is a big part of our business. It has been for a long time. My predecessor, Tom DiMiola, got the fishing company started on selling online in 1995.
In the catalogs, I remember getting the catalog.
Yeah, we got all the old catalogs right up there.
Oh wow.
We're still doing those, but yeah, he was a real pioneer when it came to
he sure was
selling online, and so it's been going for so many years, and obviously the website's gone through several different iterations and evolutions, but I'd say right now we're in the golden age of e-com, and unfortunately COVID COVID is unfortunate, but for some of us that are in the outdoor industry and selling online, it's been a real driver of business. So right now it's more important than ever as a way that people can shop and get their stuff as well as get information. So we're up here working on it, 7 days a week, trying to make our web presence better and provide more valuable, products and information and all that. It's super fun, and it keeps our wheels turning, all year round during the winter, which is nice that we can stay engaged,
Yeah, well, a lot of your guys' season happens in the summertime. That's when you guys make your money. So it's so good for you to support these guys and their families through those winter months, keeping them busy here in the shop and filling internet orders and whatever you can keep them busy doing. So yeah, it's just great. Just a great part of the community and a great guy. So yeah, I just can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Brian. Enjoyed it, man.
All right.
See you on the water.
Yeah. All right.
All right, guys, that's a wrap. Told you that was a fun conversation with Joe. That guy's so knowledgeable. I love his saying, the defective gene club. The defective gene is somebody that's just crazy for fishing. So he also has some stickers made of that, and so I was able to get one of those stickers and throw it on my Yeti. But just a great guy. I really enjoy sitting down with him and talking with him, and one of these days I have to get out fishing with him. So I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. Man, I'm really enjoying doing this podcast. If you're into the bow hunting thing or into the Western hunting thing, make sure to check out my other podcast, Eastmans Elevated. I had a great one last week with Marlon Holden, who's Gray Light Hunter on Instagram. And guy is just... he's really good at hunting mule deer with his bow and arrow, and he's really good at hunting the desert, which is a really challenging landscape. So fun conversation with him. We got some great episodes coming up over there, as well as some great episodes here on Eastmans Fly Cast. I recorded a great one the other day that I'll be releasing to you guys here in the next couple weeks. So excited to get that out to you and keep this thing rolling. So thanks to you guys for all your support. I appreciate you, and tight lines and good fishing.